A few years ago, I didn't even have male friends, and now I'm surrounded by shining examples of healthy masculinity. I changed my perception of men, and it changed my experience and reality of and with them. Whether you have some negative assumptions in your love life, or whether there are maybe certain types of people in your life whom you have a negative attitude towards because maybe they've proven that they're not worth trusting, this video will show you how you can change your perception of other people and how that can change how they show up and who surrounds you in your reality. Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena, I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach. And I support women to bridge the gap between who they currently perceive themselves to be and who they desire to be or become, so that you can break even the most deep-rooted, persistent patterns in your life, finally become who you've always wanted to be, and create the reality that you desire and deserve. Recently, I was out with some friends, and these were all single friends who wanted to date, who wanted a relationship, and what I noticed was that they had incredibly negative attitudes to the people they were attracted to. They were basically expecting the whole gender they were attracted to hurt them. And that's because they'd had quite a lot of negative dating experiences. Similar to how I used to be, a lot of them just didn't see men as safe in general. They didn't trust they could ever change or their experience could ever change. They were taking the right actions, actively dating, putting themselves out there, but from the wrong state. And witnessing that in other people kind of showed me how much my experience has really changed. So I want to share with you how I changed my perception of men, because that's primarily who I'm attracted to, so I'm gonna pick men. But if you're not attracted to men, if you're attracted to any other gender, this will apply too. And I'll share with you how that changed my experience of them and ultimately my love life, because honestly, any relationship in your reality can really transform as long as you begin to see them differently. Before I go into the process, I just want to paint a picture of what my love life used to be like. My love life has never been my strength. It's never been my strength growing up. Like, I was never the girl that was hit on all night. I had very few love interests throughout my life in general, and those that I did date, those were short-lived experiences. And the prominent pattern that I experienced that I've spoken about in previous videos is that I would never really meet anyone who wanted to commit to me. And in the beginning, I was seeking fault and blame in those people. As so many of us do, right? We have an inner experience, we have an inner emotion, and we blame other people for that. We blame our circumstances for that. I did the same. I just saw myself as a victim. I just saw myself as unlucky in love. And then eventually in my 20s, I embarked on a spiritual journey and I discovered manifestation. At first, that came from a motivation to try and control outcomes because I wasn't happy in my life. I wasn't fulfilled in my life, especially in my love life. Now, that backfired, and that's a whole different story, and I do have a bunch of videos debunking some manifestation myths that will only keep you going in circles. So I'll link the playlist to that above my head so you can watch it later. But I finally began working on my attitude, my perception, my self-concept. I began to see that my assumptions, my beliefs, and the way I showed up and who I thought I was were actually creating the very experience that I was having. Now, changing my self-concept was a long-term journey that is not just some surface-level shit, like just changing your mindset or repeating affirmations. It required a lot of deep emotional and nervous system work, a lot of training, a lot of coaching. It really rubs me the wrong way when you hear things like, just pretend you are who you think you want to be, or just say you are that person and you will be, because we all know it's not that simple. Otherwise, we would all have what we want. But even as I had done this really deep work on my self-concept, now I saw myself differently. Now I finally saw myself as a catch. Whereas in the past, I would put other people on a pedestal. I would put men on a pedestal, the people I was dating on a pedestal. That changed through the work I did on my self-concept. Now I was feeling worthy. But I still could not believe that men would meet me in that way. So whereas in the past I would place men on a pedestal, now I was placing myself on that pedestal, and no one could touch me here. Now both patterns have the root in a protective mechanism coming from unintegrated trauma. So whether you place other people on a pedestal or you on some level think that no one is good enough for you, they are both defense mechanisms, they are both protective mechanisms that come from unhealed trauma. But because I had all this awareness already and I had done so much work on my identity, on my self-concept, on my state of being. I had healed a lot within myself already. I clocked that and I realized how negative my assumptions around men really were and how negative my attitude towards dating was. For good reason. I'd had negative experiences, but I decided to make a conscious effort to change that. Because I could see the direct reflection. I would assume that the guy I was dating wouldn't choose me, so they didn't. I would assume that dating was hard and a full-time job, and so it would be. So I decided to experiment with it, and I went on this intentional dating journey. So first, I focused on myself and my self-concept, and then I decided to get back into the dating world with a new attitude. I was like, I can't be on a dating app and assume that it's going to go wrong. I can't go out and meet people and assume that they are never going to want anything serious anyway. Because I noticed that if I assumed that, that's the exact experience I would get. So I had to change my perception of my experience, but specifically, I had to change my perception of other people. I had to change my perception of a whole group of people, in this case of men. Now, let's talk changing your perception. Maybe you have tried that. Maybe you have tried to change your perception, your beliefs, your assumptions. But the old, often negative attitudes, thoughts, emotions, they just return again and again. What we're really talking about here is not just micromanaging your thoughts or your attitude. It's about changing your baseline. It's about changing what's habitual to you, what's your go-to state, your go-to belief system. So what's important to note is that changing your assumptions, changing your perception is not as simple as just deciding to. If it was, you wouldn't need this video. If it was, I could just tell you that in one sentence and you would easily change your assumptions and your whole experience would change. If it was, I wouldn't run this business, I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing, I wouldn't coach countless women through this process because it would be easy. But that is not the case, is it? Changing your assumptions is actually quite hard. At least the unconscious assumptions, right? Because contrary to popular belief, or popular teachings, it doesn't just mean that you're layering beliefs on top of what's already there. It doesn't mean affirming yourself into oblivion, and it doesn't just mean flipping your thoughts or flipping your beliefs. The reason you have the assumptions you have is because of the experiences that you have made. The reason you have the assumptions you have is because your reality has proven to you again and again that those negative assumptions are truth. At least according to your perception. But for your body, that's the only thing that feels true. So even if you try to change your assumptions in your mind, your body might not accept that as true. And that's exactly what was the case for me for a long, long time. So in my process of changing my perception of men, there were really 3 steps that I took. And I say steps, but these were not just steps. This was part of a long-term process. But for the sake of language, let's say steps. First, I had to really recognize and own what my current beliefs and assumptions were. I had to recognize what my perception was even like to begin with, how I felt when I interacted with men, how I talked about them, how I felt in the dating experience, how my body contracted because I didn't feel safe, how I'd always assumed the worst. Awareness was therefore the first step. And that's the step most people take unless they choose to live in denial. But there's also often a lot of unconscious assumptions. Assumptions that you automatically revert to, think, and act from without even checking yourself. You don't catch every thought you have every minute of your day. That's impossible. But if you've at least tried to change your beliefs or assumptions, you've probably paid attention to it already. You've probably gained some awareness around what your beliefs are and how they are not the way they might benefit you. So first, when I chose to become aware of my beliefs and assumptions around men, nothing changed. And I knew that was going to happen. I knew it would be difficult to change them because these beliefs are so deeply ingrained. They don't come out of nowhere, right? The thing is, and this will bring us to step 2, when you always assume the worst, or you have black and white thinking, where you don't see the nuance, you don't see the nuance in another person. You don't see that the same person could be amazing and horrible, that we all have light and shadow within us. When you either put them on a pedestal and create this fantasy around them, or when you blame them for everything, or you think all men are trash, when it's black and white thinking, that comes from a trauma response. So you're then not approaching it from a place of balance and integration and regulation. So because of that, I had to go a lot deeper than just catching my assumptions and trying to change them. I couldn't just choose a new thought when I noticed it, or flip the thought when I noticed it, because that would just have felt like lying to myself. If you've tried that before, you will see that it's not sustainable. It might work for a short little while, but the true beliefs you have in your subconscious will always come up, because that's the root. So then your resistance will come in, your fears will come up, your unwanted subconscious beliefs will resurface, because you're only lying to yourself. And what's the point in that? You can't trick your own subconscious. So what did I have to do instead? What did I have to do after bringing all these sticky beliefs, or most of these sticky beliefs? You're never going to catch all of them, especially not on your own. But once I brought most of them to my awareness, what did I do after that? I had to work on building the safety within myself, but also in relationship to even allow my perception to change. So that second step, let's call it that, wasn't mental at all. It was building the safety in my nervous system, building the capacity in my nervous system to be with intimacy, to be with uncertainty, and to be with desire. I tell you, creating capacity, stability, safety in your nervous system, this is the most important part of a very comprehensive process that I guide my clients through in my coaching program, Recreate Yourself. There is a huge emphasis on trauma resolution through the body and on creating enough capacity to feel safe with the future that you envision for yourself. Because just because you're telling yourself that you want something or that you feel safe doesn't mean you do. The reason you can't lie to your subconscious is because you can't lie to your body. And the third step was to prove to my mind that that version of a person could exist. That version that I wanted could exist. So I called up all of the moments where men did show up positively towards me. All of the proof I had, because belief is shaped by experience. I called up all the moments that I could remember when men showed up positively towards me, even the little tiny details. Even if it hadn't been exactly what I wanted at the time. I began noticing around me when a man would be chivalrous, or when a man would be grounded, when a man would feel safe. I began observing relationships from friends that looked or were safe and healthy, so I collected proof. And even if that was not my experience yet, it gave my brain and my system something to refer to. Something that wasn't just based on empty thoughts or desire, or trying to force myself to believe something that just didn't feel true to my body. Because belief is not created through mindless repetition. Belief is created through experience. And you can create that experience internally before your reality changes. Now, the first real signs that I noticed that showed me that my perception of men was truly changing was that I did not feel afraid anymore. I no longer felt like dating was making me feel powerless, or like I needed to be chosen, or like I needed things to unfold fast. Basically, I was no longer in a trauma response. I felt safe. And then I also began building some really beautiful friendships with men. That was, I would say, the first tangible manifestation that came in, was that my platonic relationships with men really changed. And that's something that I'd always wanted to have, but that my nervous system prior to doing this work had never felt safe to receive. I will also say that my perceptions and my assumptions were no longer something that I consciously tried to change at some point, but that was just a natural reaction because of who I had become, because of the self-concept I had stepped into, because now I had the foundation in my nervous system. Now I had the capacity to even receive intimacy. I had the capacity to receive the love that I'd always desired, because prior to that, I had not had the capacity. I would tell myself I wanted it, but I didn't actually feel safe to receive it. I had been telling myself that it was other people's fault, that men were trash. But truthfully, I was repelling love because I didn't actually feel safe to let it in. And of course, I wasn't consciously telling myself these things. These were all deeply ingrained subconscious beliefs. And they didn't even feel like something I could really control. This is also why changing your beliefs and changing your self-concept, it's not about the identity you're aware of. It's largely unconscious. And something that I hear from clients all the time is that their biggest win in our work together is that they no longer need to force themselves to think, act, or feel differently. They just do, because of who they've become. And it also happened here with my perception. The new assumptions, the new beliefs, the new embodiment became automatic. Once that baseline belief changed, this is the key, it's about the baseline, I began feeling differently around men. I began being more open around them. I began feeling safer around them. I began feeling like I could be myself and like that wouldn't lead to rejection or abandonment. I began attracting men into my life who didn't just want something casual all the time, but who actually had good intentions, who were honest, who had integrity. I began attracting wonderful friendships with men who inspire me greatly. I have so many great men in my life now that I'm honestly in awe of. Like, I look at them and I'm like, you inspire me and you impress me. So changing my perception of this whole group of people really changed how they showed up. And if you're watching this video around the time I posted it or shortly after, I'm hosting a free masterclass next week called The Mirror, and I would love to have you there because this is where we will really dismantle how your reality reflects your state of being, your self-concept, and your subconscious beliefs, and how you can use that to your advantage. So we're going to do some myth busting about reality as a mirror. We're also going to dive into what it takes to shift other people without control or force. We're going to dive into the difference between divine timing and self-inflicted delay when it comes to what's being mirrored back to you. So many things. I'm really excited for this class. I will put the link in the description box below. And if you're watching this after the class, I'm sure there will be a replay. And if there is, then I'll link that in the description below also. But I would love to have you there live if you're watching this on time. So come and join us. But honestly, feeling this way around men and having so many incredible men in my life was not something that I previously thought was even possible. I didn't even consider it because truthfully, I saw men as danger. And not necessarily physical danger, because luckily I've never had that experience. I didn't find them emotionally safe because I saw them as people who could hurt me. Again, all of this was unconscious. If you'd asked me at the time, I would never have said, yes, I believe men will hurt me. I would have told you something very different, but on a subconscious and on a nervous system level, that's exactly what was true, and so that's what I was attracting. So what did this whole experience teach me about the power of perception, especially when it comes to love, to relationships, to whoever you're attracted to? It taught me 3 things. Perception is not mental. Perception is something that is highly impacted by how safe you feel in your body. The moment you're in a trauma response, the moment your nervous system is on high alert, you can tell yourself whatever you want to perceive. Your system is going to be protective, it's going to be hyper-vigilant, and those beliefs are not going to land. It also taught me that when you focus on people's good qualities, you're going to experience more of that. Now, I will give a caveat here because this doesn't mean that you're manifesting a new version of somebody as in completely eliminating all their negative traits. This also doesn't mean that you're denying how someone is showing up. And for the love of God, it doesn't mean that if you're in an abusive relationship, you just pretend that you're not and they will change. It does not mean that. If you're in an abusive relationship or in a dynamic that makes you unhappy, get the fuck out. And I know from a trauma perspective and a situational perspective, it's not always easy to leave, but I would never encourage you to stay in something that isn't healthy for you just because of what I said in this video. I want to make that very clear. The third thing that it taught me was that whilst I'm here talking about changing your perception of men or people in general, it first starts with yourself. It first starts with your self-concept. always, always, always. When that is not tackled, when that is not integrated, when that is not embodied, when you don't have the foundation in your state of being and in your subconscious and in your nervous system and in your identity, your self-identity in the first place, then we don't even need to start with other people. We need to start with you. Otherwise, it's just a means to an end that will leave you going in circles. If you're still feeling jaded or distrustful toward love or toward the people that you're interested in, I get it. You've had a reason not to trust. But let me tell you that this can all change. It's not going to happen overnight. It does require accountability. It does require a lot of deep emotional work. If you do feel called to doing this work with me, radically transforming your self-concept, we're going to rewire your nervous system, liberate you from patterns that you've wanted to let go of long ago, then my coaching program was made for you. You can check that out in the description box below. Rebuilding your trust and possibility in other people in a future that's different from your past, that requires stability in your nervous system and really the capacity in your nervous system to let love in and to feel safe again, to feel safe to receive, to return to the version of you that had the desire to be loved to begin with before she got hurt. Next week, I'm going to share a video where you can explore if you are manifesting from a trauma response or from alignment, so that we can get you to a place where you create your reality consciously without falling back into the old patterns and old cycles again and again. I'll see you next week, and hopefully I'll see you in the Mirror Masterclass as well.